Hi, Dr. Smith. Just saw your message, and here I am. We're recording it. Um, my uh, research topic was evaluating how the revolutionary and loyalist preachers had differing biblical hermeneutics, that is, methods of interpreting scripture, the Bible, and how that led to the revolutionaries, uh, pastors or ministers, to support the revolution, and the loyalist ministers to be against it, to be on the side with of the monarchy. So, um, quite a few influential ministers, people like Jonathan Mayhew, who really predates the beginning of the revolution, but really kind of sets the early tone of incorporating Enlightenment ideas. He kind of progresses into people like Samuel Langdon, who is one of the foundational people who was heavily used to support this relatively short work. This is in contrast to people like Jonathan Buchanan, a loyalist minister who was used fairly similar scriptures uh, to argue the opposite that these ministers were arguing. And the difference in how they theologically supported their positions were their theology. At least that's what I argued. And so um, the difference in their interpretation was that the revolutionary ministers, so that would be Jonathan Mayhew, Samuel Langdon, um, Samuel West was another one, they had a meta-narrative interpretation of Scripture, or meta-narrative hermeneutic, which means that they took the Bible in its entirety and made everything work together to fit the entirety of that context. This usually involved finding common themes throughout Scripture, so things like liberty, fighting against tyranny, lots of effect similes of like the colonists being represented by the Israelites in the Old Testament during like the Babylonian conquest and the Assyrian conquest. Um, so a lot of those themes is what made up the uh, revolutionary hermeneutic, in contrast to the loyalist hermeneutic, which was much more loyal. Yes, the loyalist hermeneutic was much more literal, uh, taking what the scriptures were saying at face value. And this allowed um, the revolutionary ministers to incorporate Enlightenment ideas in defiance of the British Empire. So, for example, uh, things like the Puritan covenant theology allowed the um, revolutionary ministers, which also happened to be substantially a large proportion from New England, not a coincidence. That allowed them the covenant theology allowed the Puritan ministers to incorporate social contract theory very easily into their sermons. They had that bulwark already in their history, in their foundation. Similarly, with um, like the coming of uh, the coming of the colonists on the Mayflower, the Pilgrims, they made the Mayflower Compact. So covenant was a very um, influential thing throughout, and so that's just an example of how the meta narrative interpretation of Scripture by the revolutionary ministers uh, enabled them to support the American Revolution. Thank you.